Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Edwin. If you're new here, I'm a dental student studying at the University of Adelaide. If my background looks slightly different, I'm back in Sydney for the rest of the semester and until next semester begins, I guess. So it's great to be back in Sydney around my friends. In today's video, we're going to be talking about 5 study tips on how to maximize your study time and efficiently learn that content to ace that exam and get the results you deserve. Now, for those of you in America, well, lucky you guys are probably in summer break, but for those who are watching in Australia or in the Southern Hemisphere, we're probably getting closer to the end of June, which tends to be when the semester 1 exam is placed. So probably this semester exam is going to be slightly different, probably most likely to be online for most of you guys watching. But let's get into the tips. So tip number 1 is to use online resources efficiently. So we live in a world where we're on the internet constantly, but the internet is a miracle because it stores pretty much the entire human knowledge as a database online. So one of the platforms I love to use is the platform we are on right now, and that is YouTube. So YouTube is a great way to learn new content, but also revise content. So whether you're studying economics, law, science, physics, mathematics, there are great teachers online to help you learn and revise content. So for example, if I had a lecture on, let's say, the nervous system and I'm struggling to understand some of the concepts because maybe the teacher taught it in a way that I wasn't used to or I just didn't understand. There are a myriad of different teachers online that will help you grasp that content better. So no matter what you're learning, I think YouTube is a great resource that everyone should use when they're learning a new topic, but also when they're revising. And if you're watching those videos of teachers who have explained topics very well, you're probably going to memorize it better. You're probably going to be able to answer questions about it during the exam. Okay, so tip number 2 is make succinct notes. So many of you guys will probably have been making notes for your subjects, but there are a few mistakes I see about people writing their notes from time to time. Mistake number 1 is probably asking for someone else's notes, especially someone who's done well in that subject. Now, that person has probably done well because they've spent time and effort in gathering resources and putting his or her own notes together and revising that. If you're just going to rely on someone else's notes and hoping to get the results they got, it's probably not likely to happen. So I definitely recommend people make their own notes because they can memorize it and put it into their brains a bit better. Mistake number 2 is writing too in detailed notes, right? The notes are too detailed. You're almost writing a textbook. I've seen that especially for people who learn, the sciences, biology especially, because there's a lot of information. Now, the goal of exams is to test students on what they know, and it's usually quite a broad spectrum. They're not going to jump into the nitty-gritty stuff. So similarly, our notes should be written in a way to maximize the content that we've been taught, right? So we shouldn't be aiming into the really detailed, really low yield content that's likely to come up in exams. So if you're learning about, let's say, nerves, you want to know broadly about how they work, how they're triggered, how they relay relay information from one system to another, things like that. Very broad. You don't want to get into the nitty-gritty specific details. So when writing notes, I definitely recommend, if you're in high school, to write it on paper, because paper notes for me worked really well throughout high school. I learned all the content pretty well because writing it on paper helps you memorize a lot better. But if you're in university, it's a lot different because content in high school tends to be a lot slow. You cover less information. But university lectures tend to be 1 hour, 2 hour long lessons that cover an entire term of high school in one lesson. So it tends to be a lot more frantic. So definitely do type your notes on your laptops or iPads or equivalent. So that's tip number 2. So tip number 3 is use study groups. So you've probably been told this by your teachers, your friends, your family. Study groups are a really great way to revise and learn content. So for me personally, at university, before all the quarantine situation began, my friends and I would gather on a weekly to fortnightly basis, and we would sit down to revise the content that we've learned in the last week to a week and a half. And together we would come up with questions. We would teach each other the content. And I feel like teaching, if you understand a topic and you're able to teach it, you've truly mastered that topic. And so through this way, everyone is learning and teaching and coming up with questions to help us, fully understand and memorize a topic. So definitely get into study groups, but also choose your friends wisely, because you want to get with those friends who want to study and not muck around during study groups, or else that would be a complete waste of time. Okay, so tip number 4 is to do exam questions. I think this is quite simple. Now, there's many ways to do exam questions. Some situations you might have, 50 papers from the past 50 years, looking at HSC and high school exams. There's probably past papers from the end of time for you to do. And so to maximize your time when doing those types of papers is do the hard questions, and don't do every single question, Do the topics that you think you are weak at to get better at them. Don't waste your time, some paper might be 3 hours long, you do 3 hours, where the first hour is really easy questions that you've already mastered. You want to use your time efficiently and do the questions that you struggle with or find difficult. Now, if you're in studying a subject where there's not, gazillion of past papers, then you need to use your past papers more efficiently. Sit them on the exam schedule, do them on the exam conditions. Discuss with your friends group after you do that exam. Study group session on exams can be useful on see how each other answered the questions differently, what you can improve on, what you can learn from others. That's a really great way of doing exam papers. Don't just sit there and read the answers. It's also definitely important to read the answers. If you're running out of time, reading the answers can help you formulate your responses. But reading the answers should definitely be left until you've discussed with your friends, come together to come up with that perfect response. Maybe a response that's even better than the model answer that's been given. All right, last but not least is the process of sticking to a routine. So I feel like a lot of people will go out there and just, listen to the advice I give them and just it will go through one ear and out the other. I think it's really important to make a habit of good studying techniques. For me, I personally developed that when I was in my second last year of high school in year 11. I realized on how to study, making notes, study groups, officially using my time when doing exam papers and questions. So it's definitely all about the routine. If you get into a good study routine when you're younger, it's going to be beneficial for you when you get into uni, when you do your masters, when you do your PhD, when you get into the workforce where you have to manage your time. I think having a good study routine is really important. So definitely try and implement what's been taught in this video, right? Make it a habit. So it's often said that to make something a habit, you've got to do it for 63 days or 43 days, something like that. So you've got to keep it going. If you do it for a week, if you stick to this plan for a week and then not do it for the rest of the year, you're not going to get much out of this. So as someone who's been quite successful in taking exams, done quite well throughout my academic career, I think sticking to a routine and getting into that rhythm and getting into that zone of studying on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, right, is very, very important. So hopefully all of you guys ace your online exams this semester, and for those of you who are doing written papers, good luck and study hard. Peace.